let me just start by saying I am absolutely terrified of sharks. Now, I live on the beautiful coast of Australia, and I would probably be an avid surfer if it wasn't for the fear of having my limbs torn off by a giant jerk of a fish. I think this is why the idea of actually playing the role of a shark and playing out my biggest fears from the opposite side of the equation sat so well for me. The idea of a semi-open world shark RPG was probably the last thing I expected to see. I mean, it sounds like one of those bizarre concepts from an indie game developer that would turn out horrible. The good news is that is far from the truth. For what it is, developers Blindside and Tripwire Interactive did an excellent job in making you feel like the king of the sea. While far from a flawless experience, I had a lot of fun jumping into the fins of a shark and devouring absolutely everything that came my way. If you're after a unique, lighthearted experience to keep you busy for a few hours, then Maneater may be worth checking out. Before we get into it, if you liked this review, it would help out a lot if you hit the like button and also subbed for loads more RPG content from both the past and current generations. Alright, let's get into it.
I got one hand can still tie a hook. You got two can barely tie his shoes. Must get that from his mama.
The core narrative of Maneater revolves around the rivalry between a shark and Scaly Pete. He's a shark hunter and kills your mum at the start of the game when you're nothing more than I tried not to, I really did, I just could not resist. The way that the story unfolds is creative, entertaining, and at times hilarious. This is all done through a narrator who is basically the voice behind a new shark documentary series titled Maneater. His constant commentary is always a pleasure to listen to and makes swimming through the ocean not as lonely as it could be.
The shark is now an adult, and she should probably spend less, save more, and start researching indexed mutual funds.
Whether it be comments on the nature of the shark and other wildlife that you encounter, or even humorous comments about the many landmarks that can be found around the waters, it's bound to put a smile on your face.
After losing to King Crush in the 2011 Monster Mania semifinals, Big Finn stepped away from the limelight for a simpler, more natural way of life.
Not only this, but there's also a narrative shift to Pete's point of view as he's often interviewed by the crew of the Maneater TV series. This shift back and forth really highlights the rivalry between Scaly Pete and the shark, and it's probably the perfect narrative device for this sort of game. Your journey from baby shark to mega shark takes place over several interconnected areas ranging from swamplands to the open ocean. One of the greatest things about Maneater is how the areas are all so different to each other. I mean, the game takes place underwater and it would be so easy to fall into the trap of constructing areas that are all too similar to each other. Not only are the surrounding landscapes completely different, but underwater also feels completely different in each area. Progression takes place through completing a bunch of objectives in a given area, then defeating the local apex predator of the region, and then sometimes a showdown with Scaly Pete. These objectives could range from devouring 10 turtles in an area to defeating a specific enemy. Optional objectives include discovering landmarks, eating a bunch of innocent humans, or collecting license plates hidden around the place. These objectives feel fine at first, but it doesn't take long for them to become super repetitive. Upon entering each region, my process involved swimming around using my sonar to identify areas of interest, investigating them, then carrying out quest after quest until I could take on the apex predator. I felt that Maneater was in desperate need of more variety here. I mean, there's only so many seals that one could chomp on before it starts getting dull. For its repetitive nature and lack of quest variety, I found Maneater was best in small doses. Usually when it comes to swimming or underwater sections in video games, I tend to get a bit worried as much of the time it can be a frustrating experience. Fortunately, Maneater does most of this right, and it's a good thing too since the game is set underwater. When beneath the surface, you can use your left analog stick to steer in all directions and your right stick to move the camera. There's a button for lunge, bite, tail whip, and a few for evasive maneuvers. There's also an active ability that can be used based on your chosen evolution, and this will slightly alter your playstyle in combat. I think one of my favourite things in Maneater is lunging out of the water into the air and gliding into my prey, which is usually an innocent person just minding their own business. As you evolve, the time that you can spend out of the water and also in the air increases, and this progression brings forth a load more opportunities in completing your objectives. For the most part, the controls work well, but there were two major problems that really held the game back. The first is the incredibly frequent and experience-breaking frame rate drops. I played Maneater on a regular PS4, and every time there were lots of things happening on screen, the frame rate would drop significantly. The second issue was the lack of a lock-on ability, and this made taking on many of the enemies a lot more frustrating than it should have been. I really do not understand why a lock-on function in an environment that so desperately requires it has not been implemented. All of the boss battles against the sea creatures work pretty much the same. You charge in for attacks, dodge at the right time, heal by eating smaller fish when needed, and occasionally throw in some other tactics like tail whipping. At times, this was really cool, but the most disappointing thing here for me was that it really didn't take too long to become absolutely overpowered. Once I reached the second area, I was heartily challenged for the remainder of the game. The same strategy seemed to work for everything, and I steamrolled most of my opponents. I wasn't overleveled either, as I never went out to grind, and I didn't even complete all of my optional objectives. At least the battles against the shark hunters were a bit more challenging. They will come out in swarms and try to end you with rifles, shotguns, and dynamite. To defeat them, you have to attack at the right time, constantly evade incoming attacks, and heal through eating things when needed. After you kill a certain amount of these enemies, a unique bounty hunter will appear, and through killing them, you'll receive an upgrade. This was a good idea, but towards the end of the game, I felt that it took way too long to draw these bounty hunters out, and I just couldn't be bothered in the end. At the end of the day, I thought that there were some good ideas here, but overall, I think that the boss battles were a missed opportunity. Up until the final boss, they were just too easy and all worked the same. More variation and some more challenging underwater bosses would have been great to see. The RPG mechanics in Maneater comes in the form of leveling up and evolutions. As you level up through eating things, you'll increase in size, allowing you to more easily take on larger enemies. You can also equip evolutions that unlock through completing objectives around the place. Not only do these make your shark look like a complete badass and the textbook definition of my greatest fears, but they also increase your stats and provide you with passive and active abilities. These evolutions can also be upgraded by spending specific points on them, such as protein. You can obtain these by killing things and finding them in crates, and you'll be able to fully upgrade most of your evolutions without too much grinding. As a whole, these upgrade mechanics were fairly basic and quite limited in the variation of builds that they offered, but they look awesome, and that counts for something. After a single 10-hour playthrough of Maneater, one thing's for certain, I am in no way less terrified of sharks. In fact, I'm grateful that real sharks can't do this, or this, or this. Creating a decent action RPG about a shark in a semi-open world setting would not have been an easy task. Developers Blindside and Tripwire Interactive did a pretty good job in creating the world's first ShaRPG. Just the feeling of being a shark, rushing through the water and propelling yourself through the air to devour an innocent human is great. If I were a shark, that is exactly what I'd be doing. The semi-open world also provides loads of variation and it looks amazing. I could not ask for any more in this regard. Unfortunately though, Maneater comes with a few issues that hindered my enjoyment of the game. The biggest culprits here were the frequent, significant frame rate drops, the lack of lock-on functionality, and the repetitiveness in the objectives. If you're after a short, fun action RPG experience that is completely different to anything else you've played, then there's no reason not to give Maneater a shot. What did you think of Maneater? Let me know in the comments. This was Hellfire RPGs, thanks for watching. If you liked this, hit like and sub for loads more RPG content. Also, come say hi on the socials. See you next time.